entering a realm between the hidden and forgotten, a slipstream caught between realities, a secret museum of the esoteric, the private library of shadows, all taking place in a world forged from mystery and caught between logic and myth. You are entering ParaReality.
Good evening, seekers of the strange and the unexplained. Welcome to ParaReality, a place where shadows whisper, mysteries linger, and the line between fact and the unknown grows razor thin. I'm Sandman, your guide through the hidden corridors of reality. Here, every question awakens a mystery, and every mystery pulls us deeper into the truth concealed in the shadows. Tonight we step once again into the world where truth and mystery collide. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Tonight we're not going to be chasing lights in the sky or whispers in the dark. We're following something far more tangible: an office, a budget, a mandate. Somewhere inside the machinery of the United States government, somebody decided the unexplained deserved structure, oversight, and investigation. So we're stepping away from speculation and into something far more revealing: an office within the United States government, an official office, and it's dedicated to studying the unexplained. It's the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO, AARO for short, as I like to call it. This was created to investigate unknown objects operating across air, sea, space, and beyond. But its existence raises an important question. What compelled the Department of Defense to make this a permanent mission? Now, this episode isn't about proving what unidentified phenomena are. It's about understanding why they're being taken seriously at the highest levels. Because sometimes the most important mystery isn't what's in the sky, but why someone is watching it. But what happens when that mystery becomes policy? When the unknown stops being folklore and starts being tracked, analyzed, and filed away behind classified doors? So stay with me, my listeners, because when I return, we're going to be stepping into the long-shadowed history that led us here, and uncover why the birth of AARO may be one of the most revealing developments in modern disclosure. To learn more, you'll have to turn on, tune in, and find out. But first, I'm going to go ahead and get that pesky first commercial break out of the way within the first 5 minutes of the show. I'll be back in about 60 seconds, and we'll start digging into AARO. But first, take a listen to this. ParaReality is a proud member of the Evergreen Podcast Network. For more information or to check out other shows on the network, please visit evergreenpodcast.com.
Broadcast from a secret bunker somewhere outside of Nashville, Tennessee. This is the award-winning podcast, ParaReality.
Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Had my mic muted, forgot to unmute it. Happens. For most of modern history, the official position of the United States government was clear. There was nothing in our skies that required sustained attention. There was no unknown craft operating with advanced capabilities. There was no persistent mystery entering restricted airspace. There was no phenomena demanding institutional concern. Nothing to see here, folks. Everything is fine. And yet quietly and without any kind of spectacle, something changed. In 2022, the Department of Defense created a permanent office dedicated to studying unidentified anomalies, and not just in the air either, but across sea, space, and subsurface domains. And this office is known as the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO, AARO. Now, AARO is a U.S. Department of Defense office established, like I said, in July of 2022 to coordinate military and government efforts to investigate, analyze, and respond to unidentified anomalous phenomena across all environments: air, sea, space, land, subsurface. It's the successor to earlier government programs like the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, or UAPTF, and this is a big one now, Airborne Object Identification and Management Synchronization Group, also known, going by the acronym, AOIMSG, which was more limited in scope. And tonight, we're not asking whether unidentified phenomena exist, because we know it does, right? Instead, we're asking a more revealing question, and that's this: why does an office now exist to study them? So for decades, unidentified objects in the sky were treated as curiosities. Interesting, yeah, but ultimately explainable events, according to our government. However, in the early 2000s, a shift began to take place within operational military environments. U.S. Navy pilots increasingly reported encounters with objects that did not behave like conventional aircraft. These weren't distant lights in the sky or, fleeting shapes. They were objects that were tracked simultaneously by radar systems, advanced targeting pods, and even seen by multiple human observers. They appeared suddenly in controlled training ranges, and they maneuvered in ways that exceeded known aerodynamic limits, and they left without any type of visible propulsion systems. Initially, these encounters were reported cautiously, if they were even reported at all, because the long-standing stigma associated with unexplained sightings discouraged open discussion, especially within the military, because you had that career you had to worry about, right? And you had that reputation you had to maintain. However, repetition altered perception. Unknown objects repeatedly appearing near carrier strike groups and sensitive training areas represented not curiosity, but vulnerability. Unknown craft operating in restricted airspace presents strategic risks. They introduce uncertainty into planning environments that depend upon predictability. And over time, this pattern compelled attention from intelligence agencies and ultimately from Congress. For much of the 20th century, unidentified sightings were primarily anecdotal. A pilot might see something unusual, a radar operator might notice a transient return on radar, a civilian might report an object in the sky that was behaving strangely, acting funny. But what began to change in the early 21st century wasn't the phenomena itself. It was the systems that were observing it. That's important because modern military environments are saturated with sensors. carrier strike groups don't rely on just a single radar system like they did in the old days. Now they operate with layered detection networks designed to track everything from incoming aircraft to sea skimming missiles. These systems include phased array radar, infrared search and track platforms, electronic support measures, and satellite-linked data systems. When unknown objects began appearing within these sensor networks, they did so across multiple detection modes simultaneously. A radar return alone can be dismissed as something simple like clutter, right? A visual sighting by itself can be dismissed as a misperception. But when radar, infrared, and trained observers all converge on the same target and see the same thing and report the same thing, the event shifts from anecdote to a data point. And data points accumulate. And over time, these encounters formed patterns, not necessarily of origin, but of behavior. Objects appearing suddenly, maintaining position without visible propulsion, accelerating beyond expected tolerances, or transitioning between air and sea environments. And such characteristics, whether ultimately explained or not, demanded attention from analysts trained to recognize technological signatures. Now, you may ask yourself, or you may be asking me, how do you know, Sandman, about these carrier strike groups and what all they possess and blah, blah, blah. Well, don't forget, kind listener, whoever you may be, I have a 10-year history of working with the Department of Defense in a top secret nature. And I still work for the United States government, as a matter of fact. And I have contacts in almost all branches of the military, the Army, the Navy, the Marines. I don't currently right now have an Air Force contact, and I've never had a Space Force contact, but I do have a contact buried deep within NASA. So I've got contacts, and I can reach out to these people and ask them things. And that's how I'm able to obtain some of this information like this, of course, as long as they're, speaking off the record and remain anonymous. So just in case you were wondering. Anyway, let's get back to talking about AARO. So AARO, well, it's not the first attempt by our government here in the United States to study unidentified phenomena. There's Project Sign, which was established in 1948, and it was the first formal U.S. Air Force effort to study unidentified flying objects. And initially, some analysts considered the possibility that certain sightings reflected advanced technologies beyond known capabilities. However, subsequent pressure led to a more cautious posture. And following Project Sign, we have Project Grudge, and it emphasized conventional explanations and adopting a more skeptical approach towards these things. Its objective shifted from understanding the phenomena to minimizing its perceived significance. And then you move to 1952, and we have the one that everybody knows about, probably the most famous one, which is Project Blue Book. Now, this was created to systemize the investigation of the sightings. Over 17 years, Project Blue Book analyzed more than 12,000 reports. While the majority of these reports could be attributed to things like natural phenomena, aircraft, or misidentifications, there were a small percentage that remained unexplained, and that's even after detailed review. Now, despite these unresolved cases, Project Blue Book concluded that unidentified phenomena did not constitute a national security threat, and the program was terminated in 1969. But the interest in the phenomena didn't get terminated along with Project Blue Book. Decades later, renewed attention emerged through the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, also known as AATIP. Now, operating within the Department of Defense, AATIP sought to examine anomalous aerial encounters reported by military personnel, focusing particularly on potential aerospace threats. Unlike earlier public-facing programs, AATIP operated largely within the classified world, and it emphasized the performance characteristics of these unidentified objects. And subsequent initiatives, including the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force and the Airborne Object Identification and Management Synchronization Group, reflected increasing seriousness. Now, AARO represents the culmination of these groups, the culmination of the lineage, for lack of a better word. Unlike its predecessors, AARO wasn't created as a temporary committee or a temporary project. It was established as a permanent, supposedly permanent, office. So what are basically the differences? Well, temporary programs address things like just passing concerns, right? Permanent offices address persistent concerns. And of course, like I said, AARO is supposedly a permanent program or a permanent office. Its core mission is to minimize technical and intelligence surprise by doing things like detecting and identifying unknown objects or phenomena, attributing these phenomena to known causes when possible, mitigating potential threats to U.S. national security and military operations, standardize collecting and reporting across the federal agencies, and finally, to synthesize scientific intelligence and operational data in a unified approach. One of its central functions is data collection, and it gathers reports from U.S. military services and other government sources about sightings or encounters with unexplained objects, not just UFOs, but any unexplained anomalies in the operational environment. Historically, information about unidentified encounters was fragmented across agencies. Naval intelligence, Air Force command structures, satellite monitoring programs, and other entities, they maintained separate reporting pathways, and they functioned almost like within a silo and didn't really share what they knew with anybody else. They wanted to keep their information to themselves, and that does not constitute to helping to understand what is going on. It doesn't help an investigation. This fragmentation limited the ability to recognize patterns. Now, AARO is part of the Office of the Secretary of Defense, reporting up to the Deputy Secretary of Defense and working in coordination with the Director of National Intelligence. The office has directors appointed from within defense and intelligence circles, and as of mid-2024, John T. Kozlowski has served as its director. And it was created to consolidate reporting and analysis across these domains by integrating sensor data from multiple sources, including things like radar, electro-optical systems, infrared platforms, and satellite observations. The office seeks to construct a more comprehensive understanding of anomalous events. And the goal is not speculation, but correlation. Patterns may reveal whether anomalies stem from foreign technology, environmental effects, sensor limitations, or some sort of other cause. Teams analyze sensor data like radar, satellite, infrared, etc., to determine whether observed objects have possible explanations like balloons, birds, drones, atmospheric effects, or other sensor errors. Or do they remain truly unresolved? Now, legislation empowers AARO to review U.S. government records all the way back to 1945 to see if there were previously undisclosed programs or phenomena of interest. Based on its analysis, AARO makes recommendations for changes in policy, reporting structures, and technology development to better detect and understand anomalies. AARO maintains a public website with official reports, imagery, and records that have been declassified or cleared for release, including collaboration with the National Archives and Records Administration. One of the aspects that drew sustained attention from defense analysts wasn't simply the presence of unidentified objects, but their apparent behavioral consistency. Reports frequently described objects that lacked traditional aerodynamic surfaces like wings or control stabilizers. Others appeared to hover without visible lift mechanisms, maintaining position despite wind or atmospheric conditions. In some cases, objects were observed accelerating rapidly from stationary positions without detectable propulsion signatures. In others, they appeared to move seamlessly between air and water, suggesting either advanced engineering or environmental misinterpretation. These observations didn't just automatically imply extraordinary origins. However, they did present analytical challenges. Traditional aerospace systems operate within known performance envelopes. Even advanced technologies leave identifiable signatures, things like heat, exhaust, acoustic patterns, or predictable limitations in their maneuverability. Objects lacking these signatures complicate attribution. For analysts, the question becomes less about what the object is and more about what it does. Patterns of behavior and clues, patterns of behavior provide clues, right? Even when the origin remains uncertain. And it's time for a second commercial break of the evening. I'll be right back, and we'll talk a little bit about going from observation to investigation. Hey guys, I'd love to hear from you. Do you have a story, a question, or a topic you'd like for me to cover? If so, you can reach me directly by email at sandman@parareality.com. Or, for a more personal touch, you can just call the Secret Bunker at 615-461-5001 and leave a message. Just know that by calling, you're giving me permission to feature your voice on the podcast. Again, that number to call is 615-461-5001. You want to stay up to date with all things ParaReality? Then follow me on all major social media platforms. You can find me on Facebook at sandman.parareality, or you can follow me on X, Instagram, Blue Sky, and TikTok by looking for my handle at ParaRealRadio. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel by looking for ParaReality 1. That's ParaReality with the number 1 behind it. And don't forget to visit my website, ParaReality.com. That's where you'll find an archive of all of my past podcast episodes for free. You can also find the latest in paranormal news from all around the world under the Para News section. Your support means everything, whether you buy something from my store or leave me a positive review on whatever podcast app you're listening on. A 3-star or higher review goes a long way in helping this podcast reach new listeners, and I would truly appreciate it. Thank you. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. So, one of the reasons unidentified anomalies moved from curiosity to institutional concern was the emergence of well-documented military encounters. These incidents weren't rumors or folklore. They were recorded through multiple sensor systems and involved trained personnel operating within controlled environments. Among the most widely discussed encounters are those commonly referred to as the tic-tac, gimbal, and go-fast incidents. Now, the tic-tac encounter occurred in 2004 during training exercises conducted by the USS Nimitz Carrier Strike Group. Radar operators aboard the USS Princeton detected anomalous aerial objects descending rapidly from high altitude to near sea level. Fighter pilots were subsequently dispatched to investigate. Visual observations described an object lacking wings, exhaust, or visible propulsion. It appeared to maneuver abruptly and maintain stable positioning above the ocean surface. Infrared recordings later captured similar characteristics. And importantly, the event involved multiple forms of observation: radar tracking, visual contact, and sensor recordings. Now, the gimbal incident, recorded 10 years later, presented a different set of challenges. The object appeared to move against prevailing wind conditions while maintaining stability. Its orientation suggested controlled maneuvering, yet its propulsion signature remained unclear. And finally, in the go-fast encounter, this was recorded through targeting systems. An object appeared to move rapidly across the water surface. Subsequent analysis indicated that parallax effects may have influenced perceived speed, demonstrating the complexity of interpreting sensor data. Taken together, these 3 cases illustrate why structured analysis became necessary. Each encounter presented ambiguities. None of them provided definitive conclusions, yet their documentation highlighted the need for systemic evaluation rather than just outright dismissal. One of the most revealing aspects about AARO's creation lies in its terminology. The term UFOs largely been replaced by UAP, or unidentified anomalous phenomena. This shift reflects a broader conceptual change. The term UFO implies an object confined just to the air, while anomalous phenomena suggests something that's a lot more complex. Reports increasingly describe objects that transition between environments, moving from air to sea, or appearing within space-based detection systems, stuff like that. The designation all domain acknowledges that these anomalies may not remain confined to a single operational space. So what's been found through the office? Well, public reports from AARO emphasize that many investigated cases have conventional explanations, including things like balloons, airborne debris, unmanned systems, and sensor artifacts. However, not all cases have been resolved. Some encounters lack sufficient data for definitive attribution. In cases like this, analysts can't conclusively identify the object's origin or nature. And AARO has stated that it's found no evidence of extraterrestrial origin. Now, this statement reflects the limits of available information rather than a definitive conclusion, in my opinion. And AARO's work isn't just limited to reviewing pilot testimony or isolated sensor readings. The office operates as an analytical hub, if you will. It draws upon multiple data streams to evaluate unidentified encounters. Reports undergo structured review processes that consider environmental conditions at the time of observation, sensor calibration, and potential interference, flight activity in the area, atmospheric and astronomical factors. In some cases, historical data is even examined to determine whether similar patterns have occurred previously. This process reflects an effort to reduce ambiguity through correlation rather than speculation. Unresolved cases don't necessarily indicate extraordinary phenomena. More often, they reflect incomplete information. However, the persistence of unresolved cases across multiple domains underscores the need for continued analysis. And there are patterns that can be found in the data. Public summaries of AARO's work suggest that the majority of reported incidents ultimately have conventional explanations. These include airborne clutter, unmanned aerial systems, atmospheric effects, and sensor artifacts. However, a small subset remains unresolved due to insufficient data. AARO's analysis emphasizes that unresolved doesn't mean extraordinary. More often, it reflects limitation in available information, like complete sensor coverage or environmental interference. At the same time, recurring patterns have been noted. Reports frequently involve objects detected at high altitudes before descending towards operational environments. Others involve stationary objects appearing to resist environmental forces like wind. And AARO's reports consistently frame these observations within a national security context. The focus remains on attribution and risk assessment rather than speculation about origin. In this sense, the office's findings underscore both the progress and the limits of the current understanding. But there's a deeper history here. Institutional attention towards unidentified phenomena it's never truly disappeared. During the Cold War, unknown aerial objects were often treated as a potential adversarial technology. Internal memorandums from that area reveal persistent uncertainty, and by the early 21st century, advancements in sensor technology transformed fleeting sightings into structured data. And from that data, patterns begin to emerge. And patterns invite investigation. One of the recurring features of governmental engagement with an unidentified phenomena is the cycle of closure and return. Programs are created during periods of heightened attention, often driven by technological or geopolitical uncertainty. They are later dissolved once immediate pressures subside. Yet the phenomena itself persists. Project Sign gave way to Project Grudge, and Project Grudge gave way to Project Blue Book, and Project Blue Book gave way to decades of relative silence. Then interest returned through AATIP. This pattern suggests that unidentified encounters may not be consistent in intensity, but they recur with enough frequency to prompt renewed institutional response. And AARO may represent the latest phase in this cycle, one distinguished by permanence rather than temporariness, if that's even a word. The creation of AARO followed growing congressional interest in unidentified phenomena. Legislators expressed concern about fragmented information and limited oversight. Excuse me. Testimony from former personnel raised questions about historical programs and data accessibility. Congress responded by mandating improved reporting mechanisms and coordination. AARO emerged within this environment of scrutiny, serving both as an investigative body and a governance mechanism. Congressional interest in unidentified phenomena has been shaped not only by the anomalies themselves, but by concerns about institutional coordination. Legislators questioned whether fragmented reporting systems could obscure potential threats. They sought assurance that unidentified encounters were being systematically evaluated rather than just simply dismissed. So you had things like hearings and legislative mandates that reflected an effort to ensure that the relevant data could be reviewed across multiple agencies. AARO's creation aligned with this objective, providing a centralized mechanism for analysis and reporting. Now, permanent offices like AARO they're not created to just study transient curiosities. They're here to address these permanent concerns, like I said a little while ago. And the continued presence of unidentified anomalies suggests that the phenomena has not yet been fully explained. Possible explanations include things like advanced foreign technology, natural phenomena, or limitations in our detection systems. And each one of these things carries implications for defense planning. Large institutions tend to prioritize predictably. Unknowns introduce uncertainty, and uncertainty complicates planning. Historically, ambiguity has often been resolved through things like manipulation or minimization, categorizing anomalies as insignificant unless they were proven otherwise. The establishment of a permanent office suggests a subtle shift in this approach. Rather than minimizing ambiguity, AARO acknowledges its persistence. AARO reflects a shift in how institutions engage with this uncertainty. Rather than dismissing this ambiguity, they're formalizing this inquiry. An unidentified object in controlled airspace presents challenges regardless of its origin. The emphasis shifts from explanation to preparedness. It shifts from curiosity to resilience. Now, with that being said, it is time for a quick commercial break, the last one of the evening. I will be right back after these messages.
You've listened to the stories. You've questioned the truth. Now it's time to wear it. Head over to ParaReality.com and check out the official ParaReality merchandise shop. T-shirts featuring the official podcast logo, the iconic ParaReality all-seeing eye, plus mugs, hats, totes, pillows, stickers, and yes, even something for your pooch. But while you're there, don't stop at the merch. Look a little closer. Dig a little deeper. Somewhere on the site, you'll find the entrance to the secret bunker, the members-only section of ParaReality.com. Inside, the ParaReality top secret files. Real FBI documents on UFOs, aliens, Bigfoot, Adolf Hitler, and more. Plus classified audio. Some of the strangest messages ever left on the secret bunker hotline, and access to a secret podcast side project that's never been released publicly. And here's the best part. It's all absolutely free. Once you're in, don't forget to claim your free ParaReality Podcast Secret Bunker t-shirt. Just make sure you place your order. The truth is out there. The bunker is waiting. Visit ParaReality.com and find what you weren't supposed to.
Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. It's time to wind things down. And as my last thoughts about AARO, you know, for people who are interested in UFOs and UAPs, AARO has become a central focal point of official investigation and declassification efforts, even if so far the office hasn't found evidence of non-human technology, at least not yet. And if it does, can we really trust it to release that information? Jury's still out on that one. AARO doesn't claim to have solved this mystery of unidentified phenomena. Its mandate is just simple: to observe, analyze, and prepare. And that's basically it. It does represent, though, a shift in how the U.S. government handles unidentified phenomena, from fragmented, informal reporting to a centralized, structured, and systematic approach. It's designed to integrate scientific analysis with national security needs, enhancing both transparency and operational safety around these incidents. AARO doesn't promise resolution. It does promise attention, though. In a world increasingly defined by data and surveillance, even uncertainty becomes measurable. The decision to formalize inquiry into unidentified phenomena reflects a recognition that some questions cannot be ignored simply because they remain unanswered. The existence of AARO marks a transition. What was once dismissed is now examined. What was once ridiculed is now tracked. And that suggests the question has changed. No longer whether unidentified anomalies exist, but what they represent. Hope that you enjoyed this rather short version of ParaReality tonight. The next episode is going to drop next Friday at 8:00 p.m. Central U.S. time. You'll be listening to another meeting of the Midnight Syndicate, so join us as we sit down to discuss another fascinating pop culture conspiracy theory. So make sure you turn on, tune in, and find out. I hope that this podcast opens up your mind to new ways of thinking, expands your consciousness, and produces a change in the way you see the world. If you wish to change, you must lift the veil of ignorance that has been cast over your eyes. Only then will you see the true power of the universe. Hope you have a great evening, a great weekend, and I will see you again next Friday.
If you wish to change, you must first lift the veil of ignorance that has been cast over your eyes. Only then will you see the true power of the universe.